Moving right along. That was fascinating, wasn't it? Now, that is innovation. Now, the next speaker is going to talk about something a little different. The interesting thing about this speaker is that he's probably the best example of the American dream that you're going to see at this event. The son of immigrants, he became a used car salesman. But this is not a normal used car salesman. He actually broke the record for selling used cars in his company. 34 cars in 1 month. That's a lot. That's more than one a day. He then became friendly with someone from AOL. Started to work at AOL. Then he started his own little company building websites. And then the rest of his is history. This guy is one of the biggest movers and shakers in the world of venture capital in the United States. And now he's going to talk to us about the intersection between venture capital, technology companies, and cities. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Paul Singh.
Thanks so much. Well, hello. You know, I have to say, 10 years ago, so I was an immigrant, like you said. If you'd said 10 years ago I'd be sitting in a bullfighting ring in Madrid talking about some of the nerdy stuff I've been doing for the last 5 or 10 years, I'd probably think you were crazy, but I suppose here we are. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. I won't bore you to death with my life story, but I'll just tell you that I was an immigrant to the U.S. From India originally. I got my first real job at America Online. You guys may not know that, but it was really sort of that was the first company that really pushed people onto the internet in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And before you think anything special, I'll just tell you, I was probably the lowest employee there. They wouldn't even let me touch the computers. I got to move the boxes, like the cardboard boxes around. I was a bricklayer, I was all these things. Anyway, so started a hosting company. Have sold 3 tech companies now that I founded. About 5 years ago, I was one of the first 3 partners at 500 Startups with Dave McClure and Christine Tsai. And then 2 years ago, I left to raise my own $50 million fund that we closed last year. But then also experiment with this idea of, what if you tried to rebuild an entire city? It sounds kind of crazy when you say it that way, I suppose. But let's get to that in just a minute. Let me ask a question. Why are technology companies important? Not all at once, you guys. Not all at once. What is it? Create jobs, that's right. What else? What is it? Solve problems, yeah. Those are right answers, but I'll say I believe, those are true, I agree with those, but I believe one of the reasons they're really important is that in any industrialized nation, technology tends to be the fundamental driver of growth. So to put that into perspective, 1,000 years ago, let's remember that the pencil was technology. 500 years ago, the printing press was technology. 100 years ago, the steam engine was technology. Today, it's your laptops, it's your phones. Do we agree? I can't tell if you think I suck or not, but by the way, heckling is allowed. If you think I'm full of shit, just say it, and we'll just go drink a beer together. It'll be good. But so once you have roads and you have houses and you have government and you're safe and you have all these things, technology tends to be the only way that a society moves forward. The second reason why tech companies are so valuable or important is because, frankly, they are one of the last legal ways to make a ton of money. If you want to change your station in life, right? Technology tends to be the way to do it. There's a lot of other illegal ways to do it, but this is probably one of them that won't send you to jail. But does that make sense? Yeah, you guys are a tough crowd. I can't tell. But look, the world's changed. The world's changed. So there's a lot of charts here. All you have to know is that they're all going up and to the right. The chart on the top right is the global size of the SaaS market. Right? I mean, almost all of you probably have one recurring charge on your credit card, right? And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the idea of you paying $10 a month for something on the internet, $10 a month for something on the internet was crazy. And today, you don't think anything of it, right? So the world's changed. The chart on the right here is showing you the number of smartphone subscriptions per year. The shorter chart is the number of tablets per year. This is also an interesting opportunity for us. In the US, the way that we were exposed to the internet was that we started with a desktop, right? We started with a desktop, then we got laptops, then we got smartphones, and then we got tablets. The rest of the world, they skipped most of that, right? So when you look at Asia, for example, the way that Asia is growing, India is growing, they didn't start with desktops. They didn't start with laptops. The vast majority of society got online through smartphones. It's a very interesting opportunity there, and I'm just setting this up for the city piece, I promise. And the third thing, just kind of continuing that, is that mobile continues to become the primary way that people get on the internet. In places like India, you've got companies. So, for example, the Amazon.com of India has no website. Right? It's mobile only. It's mobile only. And that's really fascinating because they know, why should they invest in making a desktop-friendly, laptop-friendly experience when everybody's accessing it via smartphones and tablets? So that's another really interesting thing. And then the fourth interesting thing, I think, is that related to why tech companies are important to cities, is that this is the only place that R&D is coming from. This is the only place that innovation is coming from. So, for example, the chart on the left, these are U.S. numbers, but I assume, I'm actually pretty sure the Spanish numbers line up, and pretty much everybody in the EU lines up with this. These are charts that are 50 years in the making. So on the left, you're seeing federal, like government level, federal level R&D spending as a percentage of GDP. So over the last 50 years, we spend, as a society, less and less at the government level to fund this. And on the right is corporate R&D. So if you want to make the world better, it comes from the tech companies, the startups in this room, because frankly, nobody else is investing in it. And so that brings us to where we are now, which is that economic development has changed. And this is probably not a very sexy topic, but let me just ask you, why do people move to different cities? Why do people move to different cities? Opportunities, what was it? More opportunities. That is right. People move, if you just look at all the research, people move because there's greater economic opportunities for them. Now they'll stay because the quality of life is good. They'll stay because the cost of living is low. But let's be very clear that what brings people to cities is economic opportunity. And that's what economic development is. So economic development is over because the age of the industrial city is over. When we look at the Midwest of the United States, for example, a lot of our cities there are built around large manufacturing plants, right? So car factories, plate factories, paper plate factories, timber factories, all these things. But the world's changed now. You can't build a safe place, a city that has economic opportunity if your entire strategy as a city is to bring more factories. I mean, look, I'm going to be very presumptuous here, but I'm pretty sure nobody in this room is the kind of person that is aspiring, and I say this carefully, you're not going to go work in a factory. You would not move. Is this a true statement? Would you move to a city because there are a lot of factory jobs there for you? And yet, so everybody's saying no, and yet, most of our cities, when they think about economic development in the US and in the EU, think a lot about economic development in the sense of, well, let's just bring more factories. If we bring more factories, life will be good. It doesn't work anymore because now it's possible to build billion-dollar companies in T-shirts from a couch, from anywhere. Right? So there's a little asterisk on this because you can start anywhere, but you still need some place to build your company. That's probably the fancy way to say it right there, but the point is, for anybody that's ever worked at home, if you've ever worked at home for your job, you know that on the first day of working from home, you're like, hey, this is amazing. And then the third day, you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, I wish I could talk to another human. And then the fifth day, you're like, fuck, I'm talking to the dog now. It's because it's human nature. You can start anywhere, but human nature, you want to be around other people like yourself. So if you think about the last 5 years, think about what you've seen but not noticed, which is the rise of the co-working space. You guys all have, you guys know what co-working spaces are, right? Did they exist 5 years ago? No. The nature of work has changed. More of us are independent. More of us are mobile. More of us can actually work from a beach somewhere or an office here. It's all the same. You don't know where the person you're calling is actually sitting. But again, this is where the opportunity is for cities. Diving into the research a little bit, what we see is that the more urban the center, the more prosperous that center. The better way to say it is that there's a near perfect correlation between the number of small companies in a city or a town and the later growth of that region. I mean, that doesn't seem like rocket science, but most people don't think about it that way. The point is, the more small businesses there are in a city, the richer that city gets. I mean, that's real research, and I'll tell you how to get these slides and the citations at the end here. But here's sort of the dirty secret, and that is that tech companies will never create the majority of jobs. They'll never create the majority of jobs, but they have a disproportionately positive effect on the economy. This is probably the way to say it, but this kind of pisses off a lot of people. But what happens in the tech community, what happens in the startup sector will determine the salary of most people in that region, whether they work in tech or not. Think about that. The average income for a technology company employee is higher than the median of any region. So I don't know the numbers here, for example, for Madrid, but if you look at Washington, D.C., the average income there is $90,000 US. That's a 50-mile radius with something like 5 million people or something like that. It's about $90,000. The average income for a startup employee that has revenue is about $122,000. Now that delta, the difference, that $30,000 difference, what do people do when they make more money? Right? We know we should save money, but we don't. We go out to a bar more often. We buy more clothes for our children. We take our families out on vacations, but we spend the money, right? And when you spend that money, what happens? You end up creating more jobs. That is the basis of economic development. That is why technology companies are so important. But there's something interesting here as well to consider. When you think about how cities are built today, we as a society, we think about, well, if we bring in another restaurant, maybe people will want to live here. If we bring in another school, maybe people want to live here. But the reality is, even though the majority of jobs in every country on the planet are what are called local services, so your local hairdresser, your local nail salon, your local plumber, even though those are the majority of jobs on the planet, they are the effect of economic development, not the cause. So if you bring another plumber and you tell a plumber to start a business here, that doesn't make Madrid better. It doesn't make Madrid worse, but it doesn't make it better. Ultimately, what will make Madrid better, what will make any of your cities better, is if you think about where growth comes from. It comes from the entrepreneurs in this room. So proximity is valuable, and modern economic development is really about people. And I'm gonna just keep this idea in the back of your head because we're gonna jump into some examples here in just a minute. But it's really about people. None of you ever woke up one morning and you said, I'm gonna go work at that office because, man, that office looks so nice. You wake up actually and you say, I met this cool person at this co-working place. I'm gonna go over there. Is that true? So here's the opportunity. For the investors in the room, we know that there's been a rise of seed investing all across the world. And we also know that there's a gauntlet, that there's sort of a bit of a crunch going into the Series A. One of the opportunities for us as investors now is to think about how do you pick the companies that are going through that crunch? Let's say they've gone through an accelerator in Kansas in the United States, or they've gone through an accelerator in Bangalore, India. But they're not maybe ready for a Series A, but they're still looking like a pretty good business. What if you invested in them and you brought them here? What if you did that? Because again, there's a big opportunity right after the seed round, but before the A level. There's a really interesting opportunity there. And so that's what we did. So for those of you that might have ever been to Washington, D.C., That's the city there. You can kind of see across the river. That airport right there is Washington Reagan Airport. That's the DCA airport code. You can get there in about, 11 hours flying from here. But that city on the left side is Crystal City. It's about 8 million square feet. I guess in meters, it's about 800,000 square meters. So we took over the entire thing 2 years ago. Like, we really took it over. I put my face on every lamppost, every bus, every train, everything. It was crazy. It was actually like my mother wasn't sure if it was illegal or if it's just weird. But the idea was we were going to change the way that the city was going to be run, and we were going to start by telling people that there was somebody new that was running it. And so within 2 years, now when we took over, that city had 50% vacancy. 50%. So for anybody in commercial real estate, that's bad. That's really bad. Half of the buildings sat empty for at least 10 years. We had only about 4,000 people that would come to that city, even though it's a 5-minute train ride from downtown Washington, D.C. 4,000 people for 8 million square feet. It was crazy. I mean, it was losing money. Within 2 years, so if you just look at the numbers right now, 2 years, we took it over in July or August of 2013. Today, we're at something like 7% vacancy, and we have 60,000 people a week that come there. And we have everything from large companies that have taken leases with us. We have small companies. We have startups. We have celebrity chefs. Actually, for the Spaniards in the room, I'm going to say his name wrong, but Jose Andres, you guys know who that is? Yeah, so he's opened a restaurant with us, and great food. Now, every time I come to Madrid and I eat food here, I realize Jose's overcharging me. It's like, I got a little thing of, he has like a little plate of ham. By the way, nobody tweet that. He's a nice guy. He's a capitalist. I love it. But like a little plate of like artisanal ham is like $30 over there, and I go to the market here and it's like $3. I'm like, oh man, all right. Anyway, but the point is though, is that you can build a city, you can rebuild a city, and believe it or not, it starts with the startups. So, we have Lockheed Martin that opened up Lockheed Martin, they build defense, they build defense systems, missiles and destroyers and things like that, satellites, spaceships. They moved their R&D department into Crystal City because their employees love being around the smart entrepreneurs, right? But we also have guys like Jose that open restaurants because remember, he knows that they are making a little bit more money than the average, and they're going to pay $30 for a plate. And so it worked. My point here is simply that it worked. And just as a little bit of a teaser, actually, I should say, is that I spend a lot of time now thinking about where we'll do it next. Crystal City's operating, it's running, it's doing well, it's growing, it's continuing to grow. The question now for us is where do we apply it next? And we're an open book. You guys should take any of these ideas and think about how to use them in your own towns. But, I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, do we do it in rural Kansas? Do we do it here in Madrid? Do we do it somewhere else? So, just jumping past that, look, the private market, all of these startups, everything's more accessible, everything's more transparent. For the founders and the investors in the room, there's no excuse for, pitching a bad idea anymore, right? So, for example, if you want to come to Crystal City and work there, you got to have a business. Now, you could have one customer, but you got to have a business. But everything's online. So for example, at 500 Startups, we put all of our slides online. All these other VCs blog. But everything's becoming more efficient. So for the founders in the room, for the investors in the room, even for the economic development or political folks in the room, I think the two things that are really important is to think about focusing on traction. And it doesn't have to be a lot of traction, but if you're going to bring somebody to your city, think about the traction they have. Don't worry about the idea. Think about the traction. But also think about, for the founders especially, learn to communicate and inspire people. Right? We're sitting here in a venue. I think this is is the third year of South Summit? And you've got, I don't know, it seems like 1,000 plus people coming to the event. But just think of that. There's 1,000 people trying to start a business. And so for the founders in the room, in order to step out of that noise, not only do you have to have traction, but you have to learn how to communicate what you're doing. But the same goes for the city builders in the room. Your city, like any city, feels like no different from any other city. But if you start to think about what is traction for your city and how do you communicate that, I think you can do some interesting things. So I'll just kind of fast forward here through this, and I'll just say, I won't read all that, but I'll just tell you, one of the other ideas as you think about your personal careers, by the way, is that every one of you is credible. Every one of you is credible. You're here, right? What you should focus on today in 2015, 2016, really, is to think about how do you become more notable, right? Let's assume you're all credible. You've all gone to school. You're all probably pretty good at what you do, right? And yet, when you meet people, even when I'm in this hallway, people will say like, hey, I'll say, hey, what do you do? And they'll say, well, I went to school here. I work for this company or whatever. And like 5 minutes into it, we still haven't talked about what you do, right? You're trying to establish credibility. You already have it. So we'll come back to where we started, which is that if you want to make Madrid better, you want to make Spain better, you want to make the world better, it starts with the tech companies, the startups that are in this room. That will be the fundamental driver for the entire industrialized world. And again, we did this in a little place called Crystal City where it was half empty. That was like a really bad place to start, but it worked. And you can do that. You can do that. So I hope you'll take some of this stuff and use it in your own towns. I'm happy to help in any way I can. My email is cut off there, but it's just paul@resultsjunkies.com. Actually, if you just go there, you can sign up, and I'll send you the slides as well if you like them. But thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of the day.